In this 1 Corinthians reading that we just heard, Paul makes an important statement here. He said, I do not run aimlessly. Do you ever feel as though you're aimlessly running around? Not sure where you're headed, where you're going, not even sure where you came from. I think there are many people in today's world, today's society, feel that way. It's such a fast-paced time. Everything changing constantly. You buy a piece of software today and next week it's out of date. Everything is just constantly on the go, on the move. And it's hard to keep up with it sometimes. And we just feel as though we're frantically being pulled in one direction and another. We kind of feel like the students in a college class one day. A college professor looked out at his class and said, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to go off from college to play courageously the game of life. To which one of the students said, Professor, how can we be courageous in the game of life when we're not even sure where the goalposts are? I thought, good answer. Good answer. Sometimes we're just not sure where the goalposts of life are. It's kind of like the girl in the five and dime store. The customer came in and asked if they had any compasses. And she said, well, we have the kind you can make circles with, but not the kind you can go places with. And I guess when we stop to think about it, until we have the kind we can go places with, until we have a sense of direction, until we know where the goalposts are, we tend to keep going around in circles. We tend to keep going around in circles in life. Goalposts are important. They're crucial. I mean, what would a football field be like without the goalpost? You've got to know where you're going, which direction you're going, where that goal line is to achieve that mark. On a basketball court, you know, that little thing with a hoop and the net on it, there's an objective there. The goal is to get that basketball through that hoop. You know what the goal is. And what about life? Someone once said, the secret of a person's life and a person's being is not only to live, but to have something to live for. And I guess the question today is, what do you live for? What do we live for? Like Paul, can we say, my life is not aimless. I have a target to aim at. And unfortunately, the crime many times isn't low aim, but no aim in life. It's kind of like the humorous story about a law enforcement agency in a town. Somebody kept putting up targets, bullseyes around town, and they wanted to find out who was doing this because it was a sharpshooter, and all these bullseyes, the bullet hole was directly in the center of every bullseye that was put up around town. And so they began to investigate and search, and finally they found the individual that was responsible for those bullseyes. And they said, what's your technique? How is it that you're so accurate when you can put that bullet in that bullseye? And he said, it's really simple. I shoot first and then draw the bullseye around it. It works every time. And yet sometimes that's the way life is. The unfortunate things, that may be an easy way to have the appearance of hitting the mark, but it's really very deceptive. And so it is with goals. We need to use them to direct our work, to determine if we're accomplishing what we're aiming at. Not to use them to defend what we just happen to be doing. We have to use them as a pace setter, as a way to direct our work and determine if we're achieving the goals that we want to make in life. Jesus said in Moffat's translation, I know where I'm going. He knew his direction. St. Paul wrote to the church of Philippi, said, I press toward the goal. And in Corinth he wrote, I run with a clear goal before me. I do not run aimlessly. I know where I'm going. I have a goal, and I see and I understand the picture of that goal. It's like the man who came on a construction site, and there was a fellow there who was laying bricks and working on this foundation, and he went up to him and said, what are you doing? And the guy said, well, can't you see? I'm laying bricks. I'm putting one brick on top of the other. I'm laying bricks. Well, Well, this man walked around to the other side of the building, and there was another bricklayer. And he said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm building a cathedral. I'm building a cathedral." See, he saw the whole picture. It wasn't there yet, but he saw it. It wasn't just stacking one brick on top of another, but this was part of a plan, a direction, the aim of a cathedral that was being built. And he was a part of it. And he saw that big picture. That was his goal. And so it is, it's important that we too understand where the goalposts are in life. Because God created us for life. And as I said earlier, the secret of our being isn't only to live, but to have something to live for. The question is, what is it that we live for? What is it that we live for? I think God created us to have purpose and meaning and direction in our lives and have something to live for. And I think the beginning place of that whole process is understanding the ability that God's given us. To find that ability and to develop it. To understand that what we're built to do. What is it that God has built me to do and to be in this world? Carlyle asked a question one time. He said, "What talent is born in you, and how are you developing that talent?" I think Scripture asks that same question. What talent is born in you, and how are you developing that talent? And we all have different talents. We all have different strengths. But God has given us all those strengths and abilities and talents. It may be one, it may be two or three. But no matter what it is, it's important. And we're all unique in that process. You know, we describe the church in a lot of ways. Sometimes I think of the church as maybe like a good salad. A good salad has a lot of good stuff in it. It has the good dressing, and it has the lettuce, and there are varieties of lettuce you can put in it. And sometimes it might have some pecans or some walnuts. It might have some mandarin oranges. It might have some sunflower seeds. It might have some raisins, some cheese, some croutons, some tomatoes. The list goes on and on. You might put a little chicken in it, or maybe a little steak. None of those things lose their identity. They uphold their identity in that salad. But all mixed together, they create something that's appetizing, that's good, that's nutritional, that we like and we enjoy. It's kind of how the church should work. And that's kind of how our lives were designed to work. We keep our individuality, but yet we blend together to make a creation that's attractive and appetizing for all. But it begins with finding out who we are and how do we develop that talent. What talent has God given me in my life? And how can I use that? And then the second part of that is putting it to use. Like I talked to the children today, strengthening ourselves in our faith. Sure, we can read Scripture and we can do all kinds of things along those lines, but that's just the first step. We need to use that in our lives and live that out. We had a training for our leadership last week, and we talked about small groups and about our faith dynamic. And it says so often we put 95% into studying and learning and getting all the dynamics down, and only 5% into action. And the challenge was, let's put 5% into the study and understanding. Let's put 95% into action. What would happen? What would happen? Now that's the harder road to travel. That's the harder road to travel, and sometimes we don't want to do that. But what good is all this understanding and talent and strength and ability if we just put it on a shelf and never use it? And never use it. I mean, Sharon and I, we like to look for antiques. We like to find stuff. But you know what's so neat? We try not to just put things on a shelf. We try and use them. We have a cabinet of teacups. All different kind of designs of teacups in that. And older teacups that we've gotten over the years that we just really enjoy. And yet we don't just leave them in that shelf, because there are times we've had people over. And Cheryl will open up that cabinet and she'll just invite people, just whatever teacup looks good to you, you want to use, take it out and let's use it.